The agenda this week reviewed issues with legal aid in Ontario and looked into boosting the supply of rental housing in the province. The agenda's week in review begins with David Frum and Niall Ferguson on U.S. politics after the midterm elections.
There are all kinds of ways in which a president's term can be terminated. The president's diet itself, not to mention his Scottish DNA, gives, I think, cause for concern in its own right. But if the implication is that there's going to be a successful impeachment, if the implication is that we're somehow going to rerun Watergate with Donald Trump in the role of Richard Nixon, that doesn't persuade me, because I see no scenario in which the Senate, under Mitch McConnell's leadership, decides to throw Donald Trump under the bus, particularly because I think if the Republicans were to abandon Trump, they would lose a substantial proportion of their electorate for the rest of time, or at least for a very, very long time. Because you have to remember that however bad things go, and they're going to go very badly indeed next year, there's a very solid core of voters who are going to be loyal to Donald Trump pretty much regardless. And that's the key reason why I see him getting to the end of the first term absent any health issue. The idea of his getting re-elected, though, I think that's becoming less and less plausible, simply because 2019 is going to be dominated not just by the findings of Robert Mueller, the special counsel, but now also by the investigations of a whole bunch of congressional committees, now to be chaired by Democrats, who will use their subpoena powers to cause maximum embarrassment to the president and those close to him. And that's going to dominate the news cycle next year to the exclusion of almost everything else. And it's bound to wear away at Trump's support until finally only that base is left, a base that simply isn't sufficient to secure a second term. Something really remarkable will have to turn up to avoid that. One little point to add, I'm not sure I agree with you, David, that the US economy is sliding into recession. It might be by the time we get to 2020 that it's really no longer plausible to say that it's a super strong economy, but a recession still seems to me to be still quite a low probability event, and certainly not something I expect imminently.
David, on the issue of Trump not finishing his first term?
Well, as Neil said, the health issues, of course, are very real. We have gotten used to presidents living a very, very long time. Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, they all lived to great ages. But that doesn't always happen, and Donald Trump is certainly a candidate for health troubles. Barring those, however, I don't see an impeachment outcome as all that likely. As we have discovered from both the Nixon and the Clinton experiences, a president is not in serious danger of an impeachment and a removal unless both parties think he needs to go. Mm-hmm. And that has not happened. And as we saw from the very first impeachment event in American history, Andrew Johnson after the Civil War, when a president has a strong base of support, no matter how small, that impeachment events really do threaten violence. But I think the Democrats are going to want to keep Donald Trump on the scene to run against him. Here are the reasons I think that I think there are lots of signs the economy is heading into trouble. The financial markets have been signaling it. October of 2018 was the worst month in financial markets since 2008, 2009. At the beginning of December, the yield curve, the shape of the bond curve that indicates the expectations of market players, went inverted. That indicates a sense that that's a traditional harbinger of economic trouble ahead. These trade wars that Trump keeps waging are not pro-growth. So you just sense, and you see one other thing. Well, consumer confidence remains pretty high. Business confidence has been declining. So I think there are a lot of indications. I'm not predicting some cataclysmic, apocalyptic economic event, but Donald Trump is going to be running at the end of 2019 and 2020 in a non-incumbent favorable economic environment.
I want to keep hammering home this point that we live in a landlord's market. I've given you a lot of numbers, but let's talk about what affordability or housing affordability is supposed to look like. It's supposed to be 30% of somebody's income after tax. Most Torontonians...
Well, that was a benchmark that was set, half a century ago, and I'm not sure that anybody pays that little anymore, right?
Perhaps, but they shouldn't be paying, just about everything they take in. There has to be a sweet spot, I want to just respond to Kayla's point about tenants, dragging things out and the eviction process dragging on forever, causing hardship. I would argue it causes hardship on both sides. Even tenants have the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. Will I or won't I have a place to stay? So there is an argument to be made for perhaps hiring a few adjudicators to bring some peace of mind to both sides. But beyond that, to Ken's point, finding ways to alleviate some of the barriers to the secondary rental market, whether it's permitting secondary suites, whether it's, and this is something we've pushed for at the Federation for quite a while, offering training for landlords and ensuring that they are certified in order to do this business, and they're checking off their, they're crossing their T's and dotting their I's and making sure they're providing an essential service. These are all measures that will have a limited impact. But if we're looking for a silver bullet, the secondary rental suite, the secondary rental market is not the answer. We have to reinvest in purpose-built housing.
Can I understand this as well? To be a landlord, you've got a big smile on your face right now.
Oh,
you wanted to go back on that.
Yeah, it was just more of the
I'll hold off on my question for a second.
It's trying to find the landlords and secondary suites are not being part of the solution, but what other one are we looking for right now? To the government with empty pockets. That's who they want to get going, but it's not the government. It's not government fund. It's taxpayers. So we're all paying for the overall, and they can't keep up with the supply. So you need to start looking at other type of ways of getting that in. And it's not about like condos and secondary suites and and development. It's about changing the system and how it runs. Landlords need proper tools to run a proper business, and we're not being allowed to have those tools because it's so heavily government focused and controlled.
Do you have to get a license to be a landlord?
Yes. This is starting to spread like a wildfire right across Ontario. I and the other landlords in our group, we already put it to, it's a cash grab. And it's a simple cash grab because if you look at the landlord licensing from one side of the province to another, it's going to fluctuate from $75 flat rate fee up to how many, up to $1,000, and it all depends on what type of rooms. And there's certain type of requirements that you have there. So landlords in Toronto and the investors in Toronto, they're trying to get their investments now into Windsor, Sarnia, Waterloo. But when you start to see that there's water billing, there's landlord licensing that's happening.
Do you think you should have to be licensed at all?
No.
To be a landlord?
No.
Just put the shingle out, you're open for business.
That's what we need, and that's what we need in this in 2018 right now.
Joanna's shaking her head.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, come on. Doctors need a license. Lawyers need a license. Engineers need a license. Everybody needs a license. You're telling me that if you're a landlord providing an essential service, you don't need a license? This is a non-controversial idea to say that if you're a provider of an essential service, that you should have a license. It's the cost of doing business. It's laughable to suggest that that's an impediment to landlords, but I'm sure we're going off topic.
We already have a hard time now getting people with money getting into this industry. Putting other stipulations and more control on them, we need more investors into this. And having rules of, here's a house, landlord, put it this way, tenants, they will have the Residential and Tenancy Act, the Landlord and Tenant Board, they will have the property standards, they can have their city councillor, they can have their MPP, and they're going to have their MPP if the landlord is not doing their part in going ahead and make sure that they have a safe and suitable place for their tenants to have, and the enforcement unit of the Ministry of Housing.
The political reality at the end of the day is that there are way more of them than of you.
And that's why they keep winning.
But that's, you see, they made that announcement, we're taking off rent controls to try to spur landlords to create more rental units.
Not gonna work.
There's no saying that another government may not show up in 2 years, just like the Liberals did 2 years ago, and say, guess what? All those rental-free units, we're putting back rent controls. And that's why you're not going to see more of that based on that. And some people say, okay, we'll allocate a certain number of units in a building for low-income housing. Okay, you don't think developers have already looked at this?
Access to justice is obviously job one for all of you folks, and I want to know what it means to you.
Well, For me, it doesn't mean sort of what it's often thought of, which is, people think of access to justice as being access to courts and to lawyers and sort of that whole formal system. To me, it's access to the legal help that people need so that they can deal with their problems in an effective way. And for me, the context for access to justice is making sure that people who can't get that help can get it, and those are often people who live with low incomes or who are racialized or who don't speak either official language or live in rural and remote locations. And so access to justice means making sure that they can participate in the justice system and exercise their rights.
Let me do a quick follow-up with everybody, starting with you then. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 meaning access is awful, it's terrible, you can't get it when you need it, 10 meaning we live in utopia, where are we in the province of Ontario?
I would say 4.
4. Okay, that's not a good grade. How about you?
I mean, we've done a lot in that area to improve it, but there's still lots of work to done. I would say 5, 6.
A little better? Okay. How about you?
I would say it depends. For the clients we serve, poorer people, I would say 4. Middle class, I would say probably a bit higher, maybe 6. So those are the 2.
So for $500 million, we're not doing too well if we're only getting a 4 or a 5.
Exactly.
Okay. Avi, you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I agree that it really all depends on who you are. For the marginalized group, if we have like women, people with disability, racialized groups, it's probably between 3 and 4. If you are well off, like you can hire your own lawyer and, and the system actually operates in your favor, then yeah, it's much higher. I think we should be proud of the fact that Ontario has such a good legal aid system. It's actually one of the jewel of, among legal aid system in the entire world. And I think that sometimes, on its face, it seems like we're spending a lot of money, but it's money well spent. But there are other ways that we can cut back on legal aid spending. So, for instance, if you look at the 53% criminal cases, people need legal aid because they are being charged. Just the other day, we got a report from the Ontario Human Rights Commission talking about how certain communities are over-policed, they are over-represented in the criminal justice system. If you want to cut back on legal aid, maybe we should also look at how police are laying charges.
The idea of adding a so-called access to justice levy to lawyers' annual fees, that has been floated as an idea. Right. Julie, I see you nodding your head. You like that idea?
I like that idea a lot. And I know that California, I know other states in the U.S. Go that way. I think good funding for legal aid is essential, and funding for other things that I think probably improve access to justice as well.
So not just taxpayers, but lawyers themselves ought to be contributing to legal aid?
I think so.
Can I say?
Go ahead.
I mean, first of all, I think people have to understand that the Law Foundation of Ontario, which derives its money from lawyers' trust accounts, contributes 75% to legal aid and 25% to CLEO and other agencies who are doing good work. David will know the numbers, but the numbers are going up because interest rates are going up.
So you think lawyers are doing their bit already?
Well, I think there is an element, and the Law Society does it. Here's the problem. The problem with it is the Law Society, by definition, is a licensing body. It's not a taxing agency. It is to pay for licensing. And there may be some room in there to do it. The difficulty is it becomes a regressive tax because those who aren't making a whole lot of money are still going to have to pay the levy. And it may not be the best way to fund it. I mean, these are big issues. And I go back to what I said at the beginning. These are big societal issues. And we need leadership at the political level to step up, recognize these are big issues, use their statutory powers and their taxing powers to resolve it. It's not going to be resolved in the back of 25,000 practicing lawyers in a province of this size. It just isn't.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, December 14th, 2018. You can see all of those conversations in their entirety. They're on our website, tvo.org, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, and on our Twitter feed. That's twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.